This is The Modern SME, and our guest today is Mr. Chandramowli. Mr. Mowli is a business consultant at Leap to Excel Consulting, a firm that provides consulting services to Indian SMEs across all industry verticals. Earlier, he was a CFO of a listed ball bearing manufacturing company with 28 years of experience. Sir, welcome to the show. It is an honor to have you here.
Thank you very much, and it's my pleasure.
So you have a vast experience in the industrial sector. And currently with the PLI scheme and India presenting itself as the next world manufacturing hub, where do you see the sector going?
The industrial sector?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, as you know that India has been progressing from an agrarian-based economy to, I would say, directly leapfrogged into the service-based economy. And somewhere, manufacturing sector hasn't grown, hasn't contributed to the GDP as much as a normal evolution of an economy happens when they move from an agrarian-based economy to a developed economy. Somewhere we leapfrogged from the agrarian economy, and agriculture used to be a major contributor to our GDP. We skipped, in a way, the manufacturing development, and we went straight to a service-based economy, with services now contributing more than 55% of our total GDP, and manufacturing still only around 20%, 18 to 20%, and agriculture being the other 15 to 18%. So somewhere we sort of, normally the developed world, the Western world, is heavily service oriented, and we went straight there without passing through the normal route of going from agriculture to manufacturing and then evolving into a service-based economy. Now, why is this important for a country like us, which has a very large population? Because manufacturing creates a lot of jobs, and therefore the government is now trying hard to make the contribution of manufacturing in our GDP much bigger. That's the aim of the government, and the PLI scheme is one such. It's not the only one that can make it, but it's one such tool, or let's say one such step that the government has taken to boost manufacturing in India. Now, in a way, if you go back 30 years, 40 years, India and China were more or less same size economies. And today, China is probably 10 to 15 times bigger than India. And that's because China embraced this manufacturing led growth in the economy somewhere in the 1980s. And over a period of time, over a period of long time, 20, 25 years, it developed into becoming almost a manufacturing hub for the whole world. It became the factory for the world, and a lot of production for world requirements, for global requirements, started to be made in China. It started initially with what people said were very cheap imitations, but over a period of time, China has now become technologically so advanced that it really became a manufacturing hub for the world. This was led by the fact that government incentives and government lot of steps to make manufacturing very competitive in China by creating fantastic infrastructure. I've been to China myself personally. I've seen the kind of development that they have done. Over-invested in infrastructure, sometimes people would say, but doesn't matter. And coupled with the fact that labor cost was very low in China. That's no longer the case. Labor cost in China has gone up. It's still considerably lower than what it is in the Western world, but it's not as low as it was before. But probably China would have continued being this manufacturing hub for the world, but for two things that happened, I think, in the recent past. One, there started a trade war between US and China, in the sense that US felt that the balance of trade was so heavily in favor of China versus US, that US felt that this needed to be reversed or needed to be corrected, rebalanced to some extent. So we had all these import duties on Chinese made goods and other sanctions, or not sanctions, but restrictions on importing from China, etc. US was not very happy with the fact that Chinese currency, which they felt should have been much stronger compared to the dollar, was not as strong. The government was intervening to keep it at a level that was making Chinese exports extremely competitive and US imports uh, into China uncompetitive. So that was the beginning, but I think that would have probably sorted itself out. But then what compounded that, or a completely different event that happened, of course, which everybody knows, was the COVID. And when COVID happened, the world realized that basing your entire requirements from a single country, from a single geography like China, while it led to a very low cost for the importing countries in the West, COVID disruptions meant that the world started to look up and said, hey, we cannot rely entirely on one country, because if that country has a problem, maybe a pandemic related problem, and therefore if the entire trade and supply chains get disrupted, we need to de-risk ourselves. So then many countries started to develop what we loosely call the China plus one strategy, which is basically countries have realized that it's risky to put all your eggs in one basket and import everything that you need from China. And if China has a genuine health problem, a pandemic problem, or tomorrow it could be a tsunami, it could be anything, then relying on just one country for bulk of your supply chain requirements would make it a bit risky. And therefore, countries started to look at alternatives. So I think the Indian government pitched the PLI scheme also more or less at the right time when countries were looking to alternatives. By no means is India the only alternative. So when we say China plus one, we very quickly imagine that that plus one will be India, but there are many other countries that are also in the fray for getting a part of that, what China is losing out, and getting a part of it. So there's Vietnam, there's Thailand, there's other Southeast Asian countries. And then there are also countries in Latin America, which can be a very good alternative. But let's say India is definitely one of the countries that can be a credible alternative to China. So the PLI scheme is basically government's initiative to boost manufacturing from India, not only for Indian domestic requirements, which is large by itself because of our population, but also to be able to make such scale, economies of scale in India by creating large factories that will reduce the cost, make India more cost competitive, and help to make in India to supply to other parts of the world. It's basically the same thing that China did. It started 40 years back. India is now sort of getting into it. So PLI scheme is basically production linked incentive that the government is trying to encourage. And I think it's met with some very good results. So the PLI scheme plus the China plus one strategy, both of them have sort of come together at this right time for Indian manufacturing to sort of kick off. And we can see some sectors where Indian exports are doing much better now than they were doing before. PLI scheme is definitely one of them. It's one of the facilitations that have happened to make that possible. We still need to do a lot of other things to make India exports competitive, or to make India as a preferred destination for buying for the Western world in terms of infrastructure, in terms of ease of doing business, a whole lot of such things. But PLI is one thing that has definitely helped. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So PLI scheme is mainly for large companies. If we will read schemes, they approve maybe top 10, top 20 companies in that industry. So how do SMEs take benefit of this PLI scheme? How do they take the advantage? How do they get in the picture?
Yeah. So as you rightly said, the government has got a limited amount of budgetary outlay that it can spend on PLI for a particular sector. There are now 14 sectors that PLI scheme has been announced. I think probably 3 more are coming up. 17 is probably where it will. And the government is adding more and more sectors each time, right? So obviously there's limitations of money. So everybody who applies for PLI scheme cannot get it. And given that the PLI scheme is in order to make Indian manufacturing extremely competitive, you need to have economies of scale to be able to lower your cost of production and make yourselves competitive. If you see China, anything they produce is on such a massive scale. I've seen factories there in China that do off anything that are there in India in many sectors. But India has its own strengths in certain areas. So given that limitation, when PLI scheme is announced for whatever sector, it is almost inevitable that you need size in order to be able to qualify for the PLI scheme. And obviously there, the big corporates will get the benefit. Even amongst them, there's competition. So obviously, yeah. Having said that, there are still, I have seen some small companies which have managed to get benefits of PLI if they can create a niche for themselves in certain critical industry sectors. So for example, I've seen that there are some companies with an investment of only 5 crores in PLI scheme, but they manufacture something that the government thinks is an extremely critical product, like oxygen concentrators, like stents for heart surgery, things like that.
Drones, maybe.
Yeah, so there are some exceptions, but you're right. The basic rule is that, or basic thing is that the bigger the size, the chances of getting qualified for PLI are better, because at the end of the day, you have to realize what is the real objective of the government in the PLI scheme. It is to make India extremely competitive for the world market, one. Secondly, to promote job creation, which comes with size. When you're big, you will employ a lot more people, to earn valuable foreign exchange for India, to reduce our dependency on imports. So all these are naturally tilted towards big corporates or big businesses, right? Having said that, where can SMEs fit in? So in my opinion, most of the big corporates do not do all the manufacturing of everything that is needed inside their own company. They outsource a lot of things and they buy a lot of things from vendors. Now, these vendors can also be big, or these vendors can be small. So you have obviously tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so on. So I'm sure that when a sector gets benefits under PLI, even if the direct first beneficiary that the government gives the incentive to is a big corporate, somewhere in the supply chain, in the value chain, you will have SMEs come in. So if that sector grows, because now more investments are coming into that sector, and India is producing a lot more of those products, because not only for domestic needs, but also for global needs. Then when the sector grows, obviously everybody associated with that sector can grow, including the small and medium enterprises that are somewhere in the value chain, in the supply chain of that sector. So the way for the SMEs to play the PLI scheme is, if you're very, very lucky, you will get directly qualified and you will become one of the beneficiaries of PLI. But if not, you become a part of the value chain, a part of the supply chain of that sector. That's the way I think SMEs will also benefit, because at the end of the day, SMEs will grow if their customers who are big corporates grow. So with growth, everybody will grow. So that's
the sector sees a general tailwind.
Exactly.
So like you mentioned, that when a large company is selected for a PLI scheme, the sector grows, and an SME can take advantage by being a supplier to that OEM or that big company. So in this context, how important is location for an SME? How should one choose to locate their plants, and how should they strategize that part?
So I'm assuming that your question is related to an SME who's supplying to a OEM or whatever it is. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, obviously, the closer you are, proximity to your customer always helps, right? Because nowadays, most people want to reduce the amount of inventory that they have tied up in their working capital. So every large OEM is looking to just-in-time delivery, say, for example. Much more in automotive sector, but across, everybody knows that to have a lot of stocks in your factory is not the best way to put to make use of your capital. So everybody wants to have suppliers who will be ready to deliver to them at very short notice and as and when they require. So they would like their vendors to keep inventory rather than they keeping it in there. And therefore, in order to be able to do that and serve your customers with just-in-time deliveries, obviously, the closer you are, the better, because then you can reach it very fast. But having said that, if you are an SME who's serving, say, 10 big OEMs, and each of them is spread across in the country. Obviously, it's difficult for you. You want to be a partner to all of them. You cannot be close to all of them. You cannot create 10 factories. So that one for, if you have the capital, yes, but SMEs normally by definition are not that big. So then luckily for us now with GST, that whole requirement of supplying to the OEM from inside the same state where he's located, that is gone now. From a taxation point of view, that's gone. You can supply from anywhere and it doesn't make any difference to the buyer because the cost is the same, because you get input credit for everything. So the taxation part is taken out. India has become one big market now. You don't need to have the state borders. Having said that, from a proximity to your customer point of view, you may still need some warehouses that are close to the customers that you intend to serve. So as an SME, since your capital is limited, you obviously want to be located in a place that is more central to all the customers that you're trying to serve. Having said that, that choice may also not be with you because you've got limited funds. You've already established a factory somewhere. You can't shift that factory now just because you want to be close. So you play to your strengths and you take care of this requirement of supplying your customer just in time, etc., through other means. I mean, there are today enough third-party logistics providers who provide warehousing to you. You don't even have to invest in your own warehouses. There are people who've made a business out of that. So logistics is improving. Hopefully the new logistics policy that the government has announced will make it even better. So I don't see that as a big issue. I mean, I've worked in a multinational company where we had our factories in certain locations. Our suppliers were situated in states quite far away from our factory, but that did not prevent us from sourcing from them as long as you met all their other requirements in terms of quality and delivery and reliability. So it's important, location, but it's not the most critical. It's preferable, yes, but it's not a showstopper.
In this context only, you have dealt with SMEs from the other side. You have seen approval processes, you have seen how vendors, why they're approved, why they're rejected. So what do you suggest an SME should do to improve their chances of becoming a vendor to a large company?
Well, obviously, first you've got to have a product that is that you're playing to your strength in terms of whatever technical skills you have, technology you have, whatever. So basically, you produce what you are good at. Okay, that's the first thing. But having said that, how do you become a vendor to a big company? So from my experience, a customer will always look at them, especially big customers, from their vendors will look at, not necessarily in this order that I'm going to say, but still quality, reliability, delivery, cost, and say to some extent financial strength that you will be a reliable partner. So cutting it all together, it's basically all about being a very reliable quality supplier at a competitive price. So there are no shortcuts in this. And this is a mistake that sometimes SMEs do, that in order to get the first order, they'll do a lot of things correct in their own plant. But having got the first order or having developed for some time, not keeping that reliability factor that is so important for you to be a reliable partner for your customer. Because now customers are, as they outsource more, and the trend for outsourcing is increasing in India, you keep your core operations inside and then you outsource a lot of other parts to somebody else. What you are looking as a buyer is that you get absolutely no shocks in terms of your supply chain from your vendors. The quality has to be what is promised. Reliability has to be there. That means you have promised that I will give you so much quantity on so and so date. You have to deliver on that day. There is no excuses for not delivering. And then if you have internally some problems in terms of reliability of your own production process, you got to overcome that, or you got to factor that in and carry enough stocks, safety stocks, to cushion the fact that you may have 1 or 2 days of say factory stoppage or any kind of production disturbances in your factory, you got to manage that by creating enough buffers to make sure that your customer doesn't suffer. So to me, a large OEM buying from a small SME, the first and most important thing is he will look at is he going to be a reliable long-term supplier? Because OEMs do spend a lot of time developing their suppliers. They don't want to put in that time and effort if you're not going to be a long-term supplier to him. And that long-term supplier relationship can be developed only when the customer has the trust in you that you will never let him down, that you will keep up your promises, that you will invest in systems and processes. See, when quality comes to the OEM, when you supply a product, that is fine. I mean, it's always 100% very good quality, let's assume. But then if that is coming by you doing a sorting of products at your end, which means your production process per se is not reliable enough, there's a lot of scrap that is being generated, but you make sure that all the scrap is sort of sorted out and you give only good products to your customer, that's not sustainable in the long run, because the customer will get a feeling that what if the 100% inspection fails and some bad products enter your premises, and then you will have bigger problems at your end. So your production process has to be very reliable. So these are all factors that a customer, especially a large customer, will do audits and sort of vet you before even onboarding you as a vendor. So to get into a large company, especially if you're producing a part that is say critical, or in terms of technically it requires a skill, it's a skill product, it's not a commodity kind of product, or engineering wise, let's put it that way, it's critical, then you have to pass all these tests and convince your customer that you have all the process capabilities, the system capabilities. So there are a whole lot of factors that go into deciding whether a vendor can be taken on as a reliable partner. So onboarding is one, so you get in, and then you got to keep that performance according to the promise that you made at the start when you got onboarded. So it's a continuous thing. You got to continuously make sure that you continue to deliver value to your customer. If you do all that, generally price, of course, you have to be competitive, but that's something that, they will always say, okay, fine, he's costing me a little bit more than somebody else, but he's an extremely reliable partner. And for that reliability, I'm willing to pay him a small premium over his nearest competitor who's maybe not that reliable. So gone are the days when you manage to get orders or you manage to become a vendor only on the basis of cost or price. No, that's gone, I think. I mean, especially if it's a critical part, you have to first prove that you will be an extremely reliable partner before cost even comes into the consideration.
So I will dig a little bit into the onboarding process here. Like you mentioned that the quality and then the reliability is very important. So how do they assess the reliability before they start working with the SME? What do they look so that, what are the indicators of the reliability in the onboarding process?
Well, in the onboarding process, maybe that the quality part will be definitely checked. The reliability will have to be proven over a period of time. So normally, if you are onboarded also, you will go through a reasonably long period of being one of the many suppliers for that part. You will never become a big share, let me put it that way, unless of course you have already proven capability, but then you will not be an SME. I mean, I'm not talking of a large vendor who can showcase that he's a reliable supplier to many others. As an SME also, you may be a reliable supplier to a few other, say, competing industries or even allied industries. So that will help in terms of they can see how are they rating you, but if you're a big OEM, you will probably say, okay, that's fine. It's like a CIBIL score that indicates that your credit rating is good, but I will test you myself. So you will start with small orders. Then once they develop some confidence in you, they will give you a bigger order and so on. So reliability has to be proven over a period of time. It cannot come from day one. But what I'm saying is it's extremely important. Then the other thing that we will generally do is to assess your financial strength. See, you may be reliable from a quality point of view, But if you're not financially strong, and supposing suddenly tomorrow the OEM says, oh, now my requirement is increased by 20%. So you also have to supply me 20% more, because generally they work on share of business. And if you don't have the financial strength to be able to deliver 20% more because you cannot ramp up immediately, or you have working capital issues, etc., then you will have limited scope to play with that OEM, because he says, fine, I mean, he's too small over a period of time. I mean, he'll be a tail end supplier, but then if I have to consolidate my supplier base, he's not financially strong enough. So financial strength is equally important. So one of my advices to SMEs, and I've seen many SMEs make that mistake, is when they start off, after 3-4 years, they are doing reasonably well. Money starts to be taken out of the business and diverted to other purposes. People buy real estate, people do something else, etc., not connected with the business that you are in. You can do that provided your balance sheet has become strong enough for you to be able to do that. But otherwise, I would say plow back the profits in your business, especially if you want to be a growing SME, and show that your balance sheet has that financial strength for a vendor to be, for a customer to be able to rely on you as a reliable supplier. It's very important, because one of the things we always used to look at is how financially stable is that supplier. If his balance sheet is extremely weak, even though he may be a good supplier in terms of technology, in terms of machine capability, in terms of people, in terms of quality of product, etc., that nagging fear is always there, that will he be able to keep up with my growth, or will he have some financial problems and so sort of go down from one day to the other. If there are, then you may be a supplier, but you will not be one of the preferred suppliers. You will be okay. I'll buy something from him, but I can quickly switch over from him in case he fails or something like that. So if you want to be a reliable supplier, you have to show that you're financially stable at least.
We have discussed the strength and the positives that a company should have. We wanted to discuss the most common reasons of rejection of a vendor. I understand that obviously some of them would be connected to already the strengths that you have discussed. For example, if they're not reliable, the reliability is not proven, or the financials, balance sheets are weak, the quality is not up to the mark then. But is there anything else in particular that you would like to mention?
So things like chalta hai attitude, don't have that chalta hai attitude, don't have that jugaad attitude. So again, I keep repeating this and to emphasize on the fact that if you become a vendor to a big company, for them you're a SME vendor, you're small, by definition you're a small vendor. So cost wise, you're not going to be a big part of their procurement cost cake, right? You're small, which in a way is advantageous, because you may not have so much pricing pressure on you because you're a small part of his total cost. So he's got other things to look at. But what you got to be definitely is the reliability factor again. So quality, delivery, etc., no compromise. Again, your manufacturing process has to be robust. It cannot be, as I said, chalta hai, I'll manage with this, I'll do some jugaad, I'll make sure that he gets a good product, I'll do sorting, I'll do inspection, I'll weed out the bad stuff, I'll make sure that he gets only 100% inspection is never 100% inspection, or never 100% accurate. You will always get some defects passing through, and that is not okay. Can you imagine if an assembly line for, say, an automotive guy stops because your part fails on the assembly line? His entire production of vehicles may stop because your part is not available, your part fails. So the risk for a big OEM is extremely high by your non-performance. So you cannot compromise at all on the performance of your product. So I keep repeating that you have to prove that your quality and reliability is extremely good. Your processes, invest in systems and processes. You cannot be a one-man kind of. So I know how to run my business. I am there. Yes, you are there. Tomorrow you fall ill. God forbid, 10 days, 15 days, you're not attending the factory. Is there a second line that is taking care? Or does the whole business just collapse because you're not in office anymore? That's not okay for your customer, because he will look at things like this. He will look at your management bandwidth. He'll look at your second line. He'll look at your succession planning. He'll look at whether it's a person-dependent organization or is it driven by systems and processes that are strong. What is the quality of your second line, third line, your management bandwidth, staff strength, all that will come in. So it's not just the final product quality that is probably good that will guarantee you a continued business with him. He will look at all this because he's looking for sustained suppliers. He's looking for somebody who will partner with him, about whom he does not have to worry. I've onboarded you and now it will just keep coming. That confidence has to develop. So your entire organization has to give him that confidence that you can be trusted upon as a supplier. So these are the things that you got to make sure at the start and continuously through the journey of being with your large corporate as a vendor.
So basically you have to be running your business professionally.
Absolutely. And I do realize that SMEs sometimes, because they are too small, cannot afford sometimes to be able to hire such people. People also may not join you because you're a small SME, etc. I think that's where you need to have connects with professionals, people who are not employed in an organization but who can lay down systems for you, who can lay down some processes for you. And there are enough now available in the market who can act as consultants to you. So sometimes your customer might say that, okay, when I assess your organizational capabilities, I find that you don't have enough qualified people, etc. But at least you have surrounded yourself with some professionals who are helping you out in managing the business. So you may be able to afford professionals who work with you part-time, or lend their capabilities to you as consultants, even though you cannot employ full-time professionals because they're too costly for your business. So you got to manage that. Yeah. And find niches in which you can operate. So I've seen some during the course of my corporate life, we had some small suppliers, but still we treated them as, I won't say the most valuable, but definitely as valued suppliers because they operated in certain niches. So you don't have to be necessarily competing with a whole lot of people. If you can create small niches for yourself, the niches could be in terms of delivery capability, it could be in terms of cost. Cost is generally last priority, actually. Quality, delivery capability. You're operating in a particular product where nobody else is willing to touch it, for maybe it's too small in terms of volume, but you are able to manage it. So that could make you a valued supplier for that particular part. So there are a whole lot of things. You've got to find your strength and play to that.
Coming to next steps. So once an SME has is onboarded and they're working with an OEM or a large company, a lot of times SMEs find themselves squeezed. Margins, payment terms, credit periods, they find them very tight and squeezed when they're working with the large companies, and they find that their negotiation power is very low when it comes to negotiating with them, but naturally maybe in a lot of cases. So you have been again on the other side. How can an SME negotiate while they are working with these large-sized corporations where they have such a low say many times? How can they reduce their days receivables? How can they get better payment terms and credit period?
So there are two parts to your question. So one is, you said on the margins, which is, I'm assuming, the prices you're saying, and secondly is the payment terms. So these are slightly two different issues. In terms of, let me say, margins and prices first. See, if you're operating in a, into inverted commas, commoditized product, where there are many people who are able to supply the same product that you are able to supply, then obviously your bargaining power is lower. Then you got to find what is the value addition, what is your USP that will make you a preferred supplier, even in that commoditized commodity for your customer. Then it could be, maybe, as I said, if the product is something that anybody can supply, more or less, then you got to look at other levers to make yourself a preferred supplier of that part. For example, if your service level is so good that even though price-wise you're not doing any better than any of your competitors, your service makes that differentiation for you to become a preferred supplier to that corporate. let's say, for example. So from my experience, I can say that we had some suppliers who supplied us very, very standard items. We could have gone and bought it anywhere, more or less. His big USP was we had to keep no stock of it in the factory. If we ever ran out of stock of that item, all it needed was a phone call, and in 15 to 20 minutes, it was delivered in our factory. Now, that was a huge plus point for him in that category of product. It was C class, D class item. It was not a very this thing, but still he developed that capability that my service level is so good that I will make sure your factory never stops for want of this part, because I will keep enough inventory and a phone call from you, and in 20 minutes, 15 minutes, the part is in your factory. Now that gives you an edge. So you become, okay, so then nobody is going to squeeze you even more on your cost and say that, okay, reduce even more, because now your value as a person who can make sure that my factory never stops because I'll supply you within 15 minutes. In whatever way he manages that, whether he's got a warehouse next to you or whatever way, I mean, that's his USP. So what I'm saying is you can do that. If it's a slightly more complex product in terms of manufactured to very close specifications, close tolerances, a typical engineering item, then I don't think OEMs will be unreasonable in squeezing you on margins, especially because generally if these items are made to very close tolerances to the drawings such as specifications, there is an amount of skill and there is an amount of precision involved in that product, then it is not a commodity product anymore. See, at the end of the day, the customer also wants the vendor to be in reasonable financial shape. He's not going to squeeze him out so badly that he starts running into losses or he's not making enough money to sustain his business. The customer is going to lose out at the end of the day if the vendor is also is made so financially weak by the customer squeezing him unreasonably. So I think reasonable margins, most customers will give the SMEs. So you got to run your operations efficiently. I mean, nobody is going to pay you for your inefficiency. If your cost has gone up and makes you uncompetitive with somebody else because of your inefficiencies, you got to set that right. So I don't agree entirely to this saying that, SMEs are squeezed out of margins by the OEM. No, I think if you do your homework well, you get reasonable margins. This is this thing, especially if you're producing a part that is reasonably complex or reasonably not a completely commodity product, then I think it's okay. Then when it comes to payment terms, again, I mean, the overarching principle I still said is that the customer does not want his vendors to become so financially weak that because all that will affect the supplies that he's going to make, right? So I don't think anybody is going to be unreasonable in that. Having said that, you got to make sure that you invest enough money in the business to take care of both your capital expenditure and working capital requirements. You got to make sure. Many times people do not invest enough in the business to take care of working capital requirements. They invest only that much that is required to run to say buy your land, building, machinery, etc. And then they assume that the working capital will take care of itself. That's a big problem. So you got to have enough. You got to have enough investment in the business, either your own investment or through borrowings or through bank loans or whatever working capital limits from banks, to make sure that your working capital requirements are adequately covered in your finances in the company. So that's important. Within that, nowadays, most SMEs, government has made it mandatory that you have to be paid within 45 days. You cannot, companies cannot say, I'll pay you after 120 days. They can do that for other big corporates, but for SMEs, you have to pay them maximum 45 days. So if your product is okay and it's past quality and all that and it's okay, you must get paid in 45 days. Within that also, now government has made platforms like TREDS, the Trade Receivable Discounting Scheme, available, where actually you can probably discount your invoices and get at a much lower rate of interest than if you borrowed even from your own bank, because TREDS is basically a platform where banks and NBFCs are actually bidding against each other to buy your debt. So if some bank is saying, okay, I'll buy at a 9% per annum discounted rate. Some other bank may come in and say, hey, I'll buy it at 8.5%. So it's actually a reverse auction. So you can actually get the best rate for each time. So Treads is a fantastic platform where you can yourself find a discovered rate of interest that may be lower than the rate of interest that your normal working capital banker is also giving. Why? Okay, when you start to do that, you may even find corporates saying that, hey, why are you discounting it with banks? You give me a cash discount and I'll pay you early as well. Because corporates also who are, say, cash rich, rather than not having, I mean, just letting the money lie in the bank or in some liquid mutual funds or whatever it is that they do to earn some treasury income, might find it better to discount the bills themselves. So all these are also possible, but those are more, I would say, when you need money suddenly out of the, but otherwise, I think if you manage your working capital cycle in such a way and build it into your financing model or into your balance sheet in such a way that you're adequately invested money to take care of both your capex and your normal working capital cycle, I think you will manage it reasonably. The problem happens either when you divert your working capital requirements to fund capital expenditure. This is the problem I've seen in SMEs. Or when you withdraw money out from the business and put it somewhere else, invest it somewhere else. If you really have surplus, do that. But don't do it out of your normal money. Okay, now I've generated some profits and I want to now take it out and put it in somewhere else. You can do it, provided that profits have become big enough for you that after meeting all your requirements is still excess, then you can remove it and invest it somewhere else. But sometimes people tend to do that. They actually take business money out and invest it in somewhere else, and then you land in that whole cycle of this thing. And a cardinal mistake is never borrow working capital and invest it in long-term capital expenditure. Then you get into a real trap.
Okay, so basically the summary could be economics. If it's a commodity product, margins are squeezed. You have to be very competitive because then you are competing with other suppliers. If you can create a niche in your service or your product, or you're working in a niche like you mentioned, you could get some better terms, but naturally.
Yeah.
And you have mentioned in the discussion several times some common mistakes that SMEs make. For example, jugaad wala attitude. Second, don't take out the working capital or cash in the early stages of business and put it into some non-business purpose. Any other things you would like to mention as common mistakes that SMEs make that leads to their fall or detriment?
Sometimes I think a lack of slightly long-term planning. I find that you are so caught up in your day-to-day problems that you're not looking at yourself, say, 3 to 5 years ahead and planning for it in advance. I'm from a finance background, so maybe I put extra emphasis on the fact that a plan is always very good because it tells you in advance what you need to do to get somewhere in, say, 5 years' time. So you can project upfront that over the next 5 years, this is the kind of funds I will need to grow my business from here to here. People generally like to grow. Everybody likes to grow. So you ask any SME, what's your turnover today? Okay, I'm doing 10 crores. What do you want to do in 5 years? I want to do 50 crores. So that is clear. Everybody's got that ambition that I want to grow my top line from here to here. But what are the things that you need to plan to do that? That amount of effort into the planning is not spent. And then you take it as it comes every day. And then you land up in, because you're not planned enough, and it's resources in terms of everything. It's men, machines, finance, everything you need to grow that top line from here to there. You also need to see, okay, I do all this, I grow my top line. What is it doing to my bottom line? Am I earning enough for the risk I'm taking to grow from 10 crores to 50 crores? What's the point in growing only the top line if you're not getting commensurate increase in your bottom line? So spend time on actually creating a financial and a full plan, a full strategic plan, I would call it, over a slightly longer term. A 1 year plan is obviously required in order to take care of your day-to-day requirements and all that. So spend time on the planning part is what I say, and let your horizon be a little longer. I mean, in our personal life, we do that, don't we? We say at the age of 50, I want to retire, or the age of 60, I want to retire, and how much I need to invest from now in order to create a kitty enough for me to take care of my post-retirement life. We do that for our personal lives. The same thing you need to do in the business as well. You don't have to look 25, 30 years ahead, but at least look 5 years ahead. So you know upfront what is it you need to do from now onwards, how much money I need to retain in the business. If I am going to grow by 20%, what does that mean in terms of working capital? How am I going to fund that working capital? Do I need to outsource some of my operations so that I reduce my investments in capex and I make myself lean? So all these decisions have to be taken. Obviously, if you can do everything in-house, fine, more value addition, you'll get more money. But do you have the financial capability to manage to do everything inside? Unless you make a slightly long-term projection that shows you where the money is going to come from, you might end up investing in. I've seen quite a few SMEs, they invest money first into capex, then they find I don't have working capital, and then the whole debt trap starts. So you got to project upfront, and after making plans, you will still fail on those plans, but at least you've planned for something. Then it's only a question of monitoring and saying, okay, where am I deviating from plan? How do I get back into plan? You have a blueprint and work for that, work according to that blueprint, work to achieve that blueprint. So I would give a lot of emphasis to the planning part. It's something that SMEs sometimes don't do, and I don't blame them for it because their bandwidth is less. They get caught in. Many of the SMEs are owner driven, so he's got to do the marketing also. He's got to take care of operations also. He's got to do sourcing also. So everything he has to do, and that's where I'm saying cover yourself with some professional help. If you cannot manage everything yourself, if you don't have family members enough to support you, and you cannot afford to pay very high salaries and get professionals, use professional consultants or whatever it is. Nowadays, there are enough people available who can help you, at least in the initial phases, till you establish systems and processes, and then that takes over.
I hear you, sir. In fact, in a lot of conversations with SMEs, I have seen that even if they have the keenness and they know that this is an activity that they should undertake, budgeting and financial planning, they don't have the ability to do that. They are stuck. They don't know where to begin. Even if they want to create a budget, they don't know how should I even start with creating a budget. And 1 year budget is so difficult, so forget about 3-year financial plan.
Yeah.
But I believe, like you said, taking help from professionals is the solution here, because you cannot do everything yourself, and such help can't be hired in-house. It's too expensive.
So we worked in my firm that I'm working with, Leap to Excel. We worked with many Indian entrepreneurs, and we always, if he gives us a free hand to sort of take him through all the steps that are needed to run this business, we always first start with what we call the vision, mission, strategy, values, planning step. That's the first step before we do anything else. So we first sit down with the owner, ask him what's his vision for the future. Therefore, what is his mission to achieve that vision? What are his value systems? What's the strategy? How is he going to get there? So we create a full blueprint. We actually spend maybe 3, 4, 5, 1 week probably in defining this, and it's not time wasted, I can tell you, because it really, that I had a mentor who always used to tell me, go slow to go fast. So don't jump into things and start doing it, because activities, everybody likes to do activity, right? But step back. What he meant was step back, go slow to go fast. So spend time, invest that time to first create this vision, mission. It helps to bind the organization together. Once all your people working with you know exactly what is it that you are planning to achieve in 5 years' time, everybody has a common vision, then there's alignment of goals. So a whole lot of things that happens with that, as you rightly said, the planning phase. And as you said, many people say, I can't do a 1-year plan. What are you asking me to do a 3 and 5 year plan? But I'm saying you have to do that. It's the hard work, but you have to do that. In fact, I would say first do the longer term plan and then come to the shorter term 1-year plan, because you need to know where you are planning to reach in 3 to 5 years' time. And arising out of that will come your 1-year plan. And even before the 3 to 5 year plan, you first got to say, what is my vision? What do I stand for? What's my mission? What are the value system in the organization on which we will not compromise? Like the Bible for my company, etc., in terms of values. So all that, and then a strategy. You got to create a strategy. See, today you may find let's assume today you find a good idea. You found a product that you found has a good demand, and fine. You say, okay, I'm going to invest so much money, I'm going to start it. If you do not create a winning strategy, somebody else will see that, okay, here's a product, and then suddenly you will have a whole lot of competition, and then you will become one more. So what's a strategy that will keep you consistently ahead of competition? So you got to think about all that and create that winning strategy and then work towards that strategy. So I cannot overemphasize the importance of a plan at the very beginning, and then you work according to the plan. And then you can always compare yourself with the plan, see where your deviations are, change course corrections, do that. All that, of course, you have to do. And then you create a new plan. So a plan is not something that is frozen forever. You have to keep on planning every year or every 2 years, every 3 years, and see whether the strategy that you made 3 years back still works. You may have to change it, but it gives you something. It's like a goalpost. It's like driving towards a goal. If you don't know what is that end goal, it's just like driving aimlessly and hoping that you will reach somewhere.
I think very clearly, the need has been very clearly identified and put, and yes, it's a very, very real need. Great, sir. I think we will wrap up this conversation now.
Thank you.
This was a very, very practical conversation. I'm sure the points where you discussed what makes an SME stand out, how can they better their chances to be working with a big corporation. These were some pearls of wisdom. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you for taking the time for this discussion.
Thank you. My pleasure. And I hope I've been able to add some value to your SME viewers. We are available as a firm to help. Our vision is actually to help Indian entrepreneurs grow profitably. We were founded by a person who worked with McKinsey for 4 years, worked with big corporates, and then said, why cannot I start something that will be a McKinsey for Indian entrepreneurs? So basically, we like to call ourselves, obviously we cannot compare ourselves with McKinsey, but at least the intention is to provide the same kind of value to smaller Indian entrepreneurs, and we work according to the same model. Yeah.
I hope SMEs will get the right kind of help when they reach out to you. And so more and more should actually reach out for professional help.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anchal. Bye.